Hey love bugs, welcome back to another Tarot Lover Reviews. Today we are taking a look at the traditional Manga Tarot. So if you've heard of this tarot deck or you haven't, hopefully this review and the flip through that comes afterwards helps you to decide on whether or not this tarot deck is right for you. Now, if you want to skip straight to the flip through, feel free to look down in my description. I break down all the suits into chapters to make it easier for you to locate exactly where in the flip through you would like to start. But right now we're going to talk about the packaging. We're going to talk about the guidebook, and we're going to talk about the cards, cardstock, card imagery, the naming conventions, the backing, the size, everything. So if you're interested in all the details, stick around. Otherwise, feel free to head on over to the flip through. So let's go ahead and take a look at the packaging. So this is the front as we saw before. Now, this particular tarot deck is published by Los Scarabeo Publishing. So you can definitely find this tarot deck on their website, I believe, or you can find this and online pretty much everywhere. I think I got this one off of Amazon, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, you can find this off of Amazon. And one thing that I do like with Los Scarabeo is that they have their guidebook in multiple languages. So it's not just one particular language for the guidebook. I like that. So the packaging is your typical tuck slip box packaging. So pretty straightforward inside. So that is your packaging. Pretty straightforward. I don't necessarily keep my tarot deck in this box, mainly because the box is thin. And I'm afraid that if the box were to fall with my tarot deck in it, that it's going to damage my tarot deck in some way. So I don't keep my tarot decks in those types of boxes. Some of them, I will keep them in those boxes, but that's mainly because I will, have them in a specific place where I know they won't fall. So I will keep them in the box. But if there's a chance they're going to be on a shelf, near the edge of a shelf, then I'm not going to keep it in that particular box. What I'll do is I'll put it in a pouch similar to this and keep them within a box. It's one of those kind of like hidden boxes. It looks like a giant book, but it's a hollowed out book where you can store things. It's kind of like a secret compartment kind of thing. I don't know how else to explain it. But anyways, I keep it in that type of storage box. So yeah, that is the packaging. Let's talk about the guidebook. The guidebook is your typical little white book. And as I mentioned, it is in several languages, so the book does look a little bit thicker than normal. That's because it's in multiple languages. And those languages are English, Italian, Spanish, French, and Portuguese. So you have 5 languages for the guidebook that you can find in here. It also comes with a tarot spread, and then this section right here explains the tarot spread before it kind of gets into different information about the tarot, how to read it, how to ask a question, the tarot spread, as I mentioned, and it goes into a brief history of the tarot cards. So that's what you can expect in the beginning of the guidebook, and then it goes into the definitions of the cards. Now, the little white books are typically very, very brief when it comes to their descriptions, and that is no different within this guidebook. Little white books typically just have keywords for each of the cards, and that is exactly what you can expect for each of the cards, for each of the suits, and the major arcana. It is very straightforward. So whenever I find that a particular tarot deck that I purchased comes with a little white book, I will utilize a guidebook that I've purchased separately to help me. That was in the beginning. This was one of my first tarot decks when I first started. Probably the first 5 tarot decks that I purchased when I first started my tarot journey. So I definitely had purchased a separate book in order to help me be able to understand each of the cards as I was learning. So yeah, that is your guidebook. Pretty straightforward. Let's go ahead and talk about the cards. So this is the back of the card. Okay, and although it kind of does look like there's a gloss finish to it, it's not glossy. It is a matte coat, maybe a slight gloss to it, but it's not super glossy to where my cards slip all over the place. So that's why I say it doesn't have a glossy coat. I would say it's just a very soft, you know, smooth matte finish to this particular tarot deck. The cards are a little bit thinner. I feel like it's thinner this way than your typical tarot card. I do have a standard tarot card, Rider-Waite tarot card, so you can see the size difference. So yes, it is a little bit thinner and a little bit shorter than your average tarot card, but you will not feel the difference. Honestly, you don't feel the difference when you are shuffling the deck. So that is the size, the gloss, and the back of the cards. Let's talk about the card stock. So the card stock for this, I feel like, is in the Goldilocks zone. It's not too thin to where it's super flexible, like that's as flexible as I feel comfortable in bending it. I know that other tarot decks that are out there for other publishers are thinner than this. And it's interesting because this particular tarot deck and another tarot deck that I'm going to do with similar features as far as cardstock and the texture feels like they're low quality, but I honestly enjoy them. So definitely when you get these cards and you're holding these cards, you're going to feel like they are low quality. But I feel like the thickness of these cards are fantastic. I like to utilize the idea of shuffling to give you a better idea of the cardstock. So what I mean by that is, if you were to shuffle in a riffle shuffle style or a poker shuffle, so if you split your deck in half and you were to shuffle like this, you're able to easily flex it. So the cards are not too thick to the point where you couldn't do this. Because if they were too thick, you would have a hard time bending the cards so that you could shuffle them in to each other like this. So I feel like definitely this particular tarot deck is not too thick to where I couldn't do that, and not too thin to where I could bend the cards a lot. I don't like my cards, I don't like my cardstock too thin. I feel like I will warp them. I just feel like I'm going to go through them a lot quicker than a thicker cardstock, if that makes sense. So that's what I like to use as an example to explain the cardstock, is that particular type of shuffle. I'm not saying you have to shuffle in that manner. You can shuffle however way you see fit, however way you feel comfortable. If how you feel comfortable is just cutting the deck in pieces and shuffling them that way, go for it. If your way of shuffling is to put them on the table and swoosh them around and then put them back in together more uniform, then do it. I'm not saying that there is a right or wrong way to shuffle your tarot deck. You do you. I do different shuffling styles based off of the type of cardstock for that tarot deck. So it'll vary for me, definitely. So that is the cardstock. Let's talk about the naming convention and the imagery within this tarot deck. So when I get to this portion of the review, I always like to stop and explain what I'm doing, why I'm doing this video to begin with. So first things first is I always do this particular segment whenever I'm comparing it or explaining it. I am always comparing it from a Rider-Waite Smith tarot deck. The reason why I do that is because a lot of the guidebooks out there that you can purchase separately are largely based off of the imagery and naming convention of the Rider-Waite-Smith, okay? So it does not help if you have a tarot deck that does not use the same naming convention, because there are tarot decks out there that do this. And you will find tarot decks out there that do not have the same type of imagery as a Rider-Waite-Smith. So when you are reading through some of these books and they're referencing things that you're not seeing in your deck, that's because they're going based off of the Rider-Waite-Smith imagery. Hence why I do this, to make it a little bit easier for you, especially if you are a new tarot reader on their tarot journey and they start off with the Rider-Waite-Smith. So that is why I do what I do. So let's talk about the naming convention. The naming convention for this tarot deck is exactly the same as the Rider-Waite-Smith. The major arcana are all named the same. The minor arcana are all named the same. Pentacles, cups, wands, and swords. Court cards are named the same as well. King, queen, knight, and pages. So as far as that goes, it's exactly the same. There is no problem with that. Now, getting into the imagery of the tarot deck compared to Rider-Waite-Smith, they are highly inspired by the Rider-Waite-Smith. So you will see items within imageries within each of the cards that definitely speak towards the Rider-Waite-Smith. I feel like there's some differences, but that is typical, especially when you have a themed tarot deck like this that's based off of manga, anime style artwork. So it's not too uncommon to see certain things steer away from your traditional Rider-Waite-Smith imagery, but this tarot deck does pull heavily from the Rider-Waite-Smith. So anyone starting on their tarot journey and want to move away from the traditionalism of the Rider-Waite-Smith, but don't want to go too far out, definitely recommend this tarot deck because it's not too far off. It's a beautiful, whimsical kind of vibe to it. And yeah, so one thing that I did notice in regards to the fact that it does pull heavily from the Rider-Waite-Smith is that it's almost like a zoomed in version of the imagery. So you get closer to what each character is doing, whereas in the Rider-Waite-Smith, you're more zoomed out to see more of the background as well. So in this particular one, you won't see so much of the background, you know, the landscape of the background. They really pull you in more to the figures or figure within figure that is within the card itself, keeping you more focused in on that than the background itself, which is totally fine because, again, the artwork is absolutely gorgeous. Now, you don't want to get confused with the mystical manga tarot that is out there that I have reviewed. So if you haven't seen that yet, feel free to head on over to my channel and check that out. But yeah, it's definitely different art styles. I feel like the mystical manga tarot is more new age anime, whereas the traditional manga is very traditional anime, and it's beautiful. It's soft. I love this. This is one of my top favorite decks to utilize because the imagery is just beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. I will not stop raving about this tarot deck, but nowadays people just want, you know, really fancy schmancy, you know, tarot decks when, you know, oh my gosh, I love this card. The Knight of Pentacles is just beautiful. The imagery is beautiful. The color tones used for this deck is I don't know how to explain. I don't want to say it's darker tones, but it is darker tones. But the highlights in these cards are beautiful. And it's not so much, the dark tones don't clash with each other so much to where the image itself is dark to where you can't see the details. They definitely give you highlights so that there is separation with the background. There's separation with other colors. So I just had to point that out. So hopefully this review has helped you in some way. If it has, leave a like and feel free to check out my channel. See if there are any other tarot decks that you might be interested in taking a look at, and check them out. If you do not find a tarot deck in my channel that I haven't done yet, leave a comment below. Let me know what that tarot deck is. I may have that tarot deck and I just haven't done the review for it just yet. But if I don't have it, you just gave me a reason to put that on my list. I'm trying to refrain from buying any more tarot decks because I just have way too many. Way too many. And I do utilize majority of them. I shuffle through, pun intended, through all of my tarot decks because I like to keep things, one, I like to make sure that I'm utilizing my tarot decks. Two, I like to keep things fresh. I like to, you know, utilize one that's different, that has a different attitude, a different vibe to it, and just keep things interesting, if that makes sense. So yeah, let me know. But without further ado, here is the flip through. Enjoy, and I will talk to you guys later. Bye.